10 forgotten poor man's breakfasts our grandparents ate to get through the day. There was a time in this country when breakfast wasn't a choice. It wasn't a preference, a lifestyle, or something you scrolled through on a screen to find inspiration for. Breakfast was fuel. It was whatever was left over, whatever cost almost nothing, whatever could stretch a little further to feed one more mouth before a long day of hard labor began. And if you think that world is far away, think again. It is closer than most people realize. Today, we are going to count down 10 breakfasts that millions of Americans relied on, not because they were fashionable, not because a magazine told them to, but because survival demanded it. These were the morning meals of sharecroppers and factory workers, of Depression-era mothers and post-war families, stretching a dollar so thin you could see light through it. By the time we reach the end of this list, you may find yourself asking a question that has nothing to do with the past and everything to do with right now. Before we get into the countdown, we need to understand something important. The way people ate in the early 20th century, from the 1910s through the 1950s, was not shaped by preference. It was shaped by systems. Systems of poverty, of labor, of geography. Most families had no refrigerator until well into the 1940s. Many had no running water. The grocery store, as we know it today, barely existed. What people ate in the morning was determined by what they grew, what they preserved, what the season allowed, and what their bodies needed to physically endure the day ahead. Food was not comfort. Food was infrastructure. Number 10, cornmeal mush. If there is one food that defined poverty-era mornings across the American South and Midwest, it is cornmeal mush. This was nothing more than coarse-ground cornmeal stirred into boiling salted water until it thickened into a soft, pale porridge. It cost almost nothing to make. A 10-pound bag of cornmeal could feed a family of 6 for nearly 2 weeks of breakfasts, and that bag might cost less than a quarter. For families who worked fields from sunup to sundown, mush provided steady, slow-burning energy that held hunger off for hours. It was often eaten plain, sometimes with a thin drizzle of molasses, and on a good morning, a small spoonful of lard stirred in for richness. Children ate it without question because there was nothing else. Mothers made it without ceremony because there was no time for ceremony. Do you remember seeing a pot of something like this on an old family stove? For many Americans over 60, the answer is yes, and the memory is not of hardship, but of warmth. Number 9, bread and milk. This one sounds almost too simple to count as a meal, but for generations of rural American children, bread and milk was breakfast, full stop. You took yesterday's bread, tore it into chunks, dropped it into a bowl, and poured cold or warm milk over it. That was it. No sugar unless the family could afford it, though sometimes a pinch of salt was added to bring out what little flavor the bread had left. The logic was efficient and clear. Bread provided starch for energy, milk provided protein and fat. Together, they formed a complete enough morning meal to get a child through a half day of school or a morning of farm chores. This breakfast appears in the diaries and memoirs of rural Americans from Appalachia to the Great Plains. It wasn't unusual. It was ordinary. It was Tuesday.
Number 8, fried salt pork and gravy. Salt pork, fatback cured heavily in salt, was one of the most important preserved meats in poor American households well into the mid-20th century. It required no refrigeration. It lasted for months in a cool cellar, and a small slab of it, sliced thin and fried in a cast-iron pan, could flavor an entire breakfast. The drippings left behind were never wasted. Flour was stirred in, then water or thin milk, and within minutes a simple white gravy was made, what many families called poor man's gravy, or simply sawmill gravy in the South. This gravy went over biscuits, over bread, over cornbread, over whatever was on the plate. The salt pork itself was eaten alongside, crisp and intensely savory. For families who could not afford eggs every morning, this combination delivered fat, protein, and enough calories to sustain a man doing physical labor for 4 to 5 hours without stopping.
Number 7. Johnny cakes. Before pancakes became the weekend ritual we know today, there was the Johnny cake, a simple cornmeal flatbread cooked on a griddle or directly on a hearthstone. The recipe varied by region and by family, but the core was always the same: cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt, shaped into a flat cake and cooked until golden. In New England, they were thinner and crisper. In the South, they were thicker and softer. On the frontier, they were cooked over open fire on a board or a stone. Johnny cakes were older than the United States itself. They were descended from indigenous corn preparation techniques adopted by early colonists who had no wheat and no choice. By the early 20th century, they were still a common morning food for poorer families, especially in rural areas where wheat flour was more expensive than cornmeal. They required no oven, they required no yeast, they required almost nothing, which was exactly the point.
Number 6. Oatmeal cooked with bacon fat. Plain oatmeal is older than most people realize as an American breakfast food, but the version that poor families ate looked very different from what we find in grocery stores today. It was not instant. It was not flavored with brown sugar and cinnamon and sold in little colorful packets. It was rolled oats, or sometimes coarser steel-cut oats, cooked low and slow in a pot of water. And here is the part that has been forgotten. In many households, a small amount of bacon fat or salt pork drippings was stirred in during cooking. This sounds strange to the modern palate, but it made complete nutritional sense. The fat added calories, slowed digestion, and made the oatmeal filling enough to last a working man through a heavy morning. Salt was added, sometimes a pinch of sugar if there was any. The oatmeal was thick, pale, and dense. It was not delicious by today's standards. It was not meant to be. This is where the story begins to shift, because up to this point, we have been talking about foods that were humble but familiar, things that looked like food, things that were intentional. But as we move into the top 5, we encounter breakfasts that reveal something deeper about just how thin the margin was. These were meals built not from ingredients on a shelf, but from whatever remained. And the fact that families found a way to turn those remnants into something nourishing is, perhaps, one of the most honest reflections of what American resilience actually looked like. Number 5. Fried cornbread crumbles with coffee. In many Southern households, yesterday's leftover cornbread was never thrown away. It was crumbled into a skillet with a scraping of lard and fried until the pieces crisped and browned at the edges. Sometimes an egg was scrambled in if one was available. More often, it was just the cornbread fried in fat, eaten with a cup of black coffee, or for children, with a cup of hot water that had been poured over a used coffee grounds bag for the second or third time. This breakfast cost almost nothing. It used what would otherwise have been wasted. And in the logic of a household where nothing could be wasted, not a heel of bread, not a cup of leftover grits, not a tablespoon of drippings in a pan, this was not a poor substitute for a real breakfast. It was a real breakfast. The skill was in the reuse.
Number 4. Potato soup for breakfast. This one surprises people. We think of soup as a lunch or dinner food. But in Depression-era households and in poor immigrant communities across the Midwest and Northeast, a thin potato soup was a legitimate breakfast. Potatoes were one of the cheapest, most calorie-dense foods available. A pot made the night before could be reheated on the stove in the morning in minutes. The soup was usually just potatoes, water, onion if available, and salt. Sometimes a small amount of milk was stirred in at the end to make it slightly more filling. It was eaten from a bowl with bread for dipping, and it held hunger at bay for hours. Irish immigrant families brought this tradition with them, and it blended into the food culture of industrial cities where workers needed cheap calories before long factory shifts. No one called it breakfast food, they just called it breakfast. Number 3. Stale bread soaked in pan drippings.
By the time we reach this entry, we're talking about a morning meal so stripped down, so honest in its poverty, that it is difficult to look at directly. Stale bread, bread that had gone hard and dry, bread that was no longer edible on its own, was placed in a skillet that still held the fat and drippings from the previous night's supper. The bread soaked up the fat as it warmed and softened, flavored faintly by whatever meat had been cooked the night before. It was then eaten, usually without anything added to it, no egg, no salt, no coffee in many cases. This was the breakfast of people at the very edge of what they had. It was eaten in silence, it was eaten with gratitude, and it was eaten by more American families in the 1930s than any history book has ever cared to count.
Number 2. Water gravy and biscuits. Most people have heard of biscuits and gravy, but very few people outside of the rural South know what water gravy is, and the difference between the two is not small. Water gravy was made with no meat, no milk, and often no butter. It was made from flour browned in a dry skillet or in the thinnest scraping of lard, then water added slowly and stirred until it thickened into a pale, translucent sauce. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings. It was poured over scratch-made biscuits and eaten hot. The biscuits themselves were often made with lard and water instead of butter and buttermilk because lard was cheaper and water was free. This combination was a complete breakfast for millions of American families during and after the Great Depression. It looked like almost nothing. It tasted like salt and flour and warmth, and on a cold winter morning with a hard day ahead, that was enough. Number 1. Grits with nothing. At the top of this list, we arrive at the most honest, most enduring, most quietly powerful breakfast in the history of American poverty: plain grits. Not shrimp and grits, not cheese grits with roasted peppers, just grits, coarsely ground dried corn, boiled in water with salt, eaten from a bowl. In the Deep South, grits were eaten every morning in households that had almost nothing else. They were inexpensive beyond almost any comparison. A family could eat grits for breakfast every day for a month for the cost of a single restaurant meal today. They provided steady, complex carbohydrates that sustained physical labor. They were easy to digest, easy to make, and almost impossible to ruin. Grits were eaten by enslaved people on southern plantations as a survival ration. They were eaten by sharecroppers, by mill workers, by families who had lost everything in the Depression and were starting over with nothing but a bag of dried corn and the will to keep going. Plain grits, eaten plain, were never a failure. They were a foundation. Here is what this list has actually been about. It has not been about food, not really. It has been about a way of thinking, a relationship with resources, with labor, with the morning itself that has quietly disappeared from American life in the space of roughly 2 generations. The people who ate these breakfasts did not think of themselves as eating poorly. They thought of themselves as getting ready for a day that would demand everything from them, a day that would not pause to ask how they felt or what they were in the mood for. The industrial food system that arrived in full force after World War II changed the logic of the American kitchen. It replaced skill with convenience. It replaced thrift with abundance. It made hunger feel optional and cooking feel burdensome. And in doing so, it erased an entire vocabulary of daily life, a vocabulary built around making something from almost nothing and finding dignity in that making. The grandparents who ate these breakfasts are mostly gone now. Their kitchens have been replaced. Their cast iron skillets sit in antique stores. Their recipes were never written down because they never needed to be. Everyone already knew them. But maybe that knowledge was more valuable than anyone realized at the time. Maybe a world that has forgotten how to eat from the bottom of the pantry has also forgotten something about itself. That thought is worth sitting with for a while.